Let the sounds of the world fade away now. Find your most comfortable position and allow your mind to journey to the Pacific Northwest, to the rain-kissed city of Portland, Oregon. Our story unfolds in the quiet, tree-lined suburb of Laurelhurst, in a craftsman-style home with a deep porch and a garden where roses climb a white trellis. The air here smells of pine needles, damp earth, and the comforting scent of cinnamon from a cooling apple pie on the windowsill. My name is Eleanor Vance. I am 68 years old, a retired history teacher, and a widow of 7 years. My life is a tapestry woven from small, cherished routines. Morning tea in my sunroom, tending to my heirloom roses, and the vibrant joy brought by my family. My eldest son, Benjamin, is a kind-hearted architect with a mind for structure and order. My greatest delight is his 7-year-old son, my grandson, Oliver, a curious soul with eyes the color of a summer sky and a laugh that sounds like wind chimes. And then there is my daughter-in-law, Cassandra, Ben's wife, the elegant and poised woman who entered our lives 8 years ago and seemed to complete the picture. This story begins on a perfectly ordinary Tuesday, a gay wrapped in the soft gray light typical of an Oregon autumn. The events that transpired would slowly, irrevocably, peel back the serene surface of our lives to reveal a labyrinth of secrets beneath. That morning unfolded like any other. I was in my kitchen, a space warmed by honey-colored oak cabinets and the gentle hum of the refrigerator. Breakfast dishes were stacked in the sink. Benjamin had left for a site meeting, kissing my cheek on his way out. Oliver, his backpack nearly as big as he was, had scampered to the end of the driveway to meet the school bus, turning to wave at me with his whole arm. And Cassandra, "Eleanor, I'm just running upstairs for a quick shower before my errands." Her voice, always melodious and measured, floated down the staircase. "Take your time, dear," I called back, wiping my hands on the checkered towel. The house settled into its daytime quiet, broken only by the ticking of the grandmother clock in the hall. I was putting the last plate in the dishwasher when the telephone on the wall gave its familiar, resonant ring. It was an old rotary phone, a relic I kept for its comforting, solid sound. "Hello? Mom?" It was the voice of my younger son, Julian. A commercial airline pilot, his voice always carried a faint echo of altitude and distance. A smile spread across my face. Julian, my adventurer. We chatted easily, about the smooth flight from Chicago, about the persistent rain, about a book I was reading. His voice was a warm anchor. But then, a subtle shift, a hesitation. "Mom, listen, this is going to sound completely off the wall." His tone lowered, becoming confidential. "But is Cassandra there at the house right now?" I glanced instinctively toward the ceiling, where the steady patter of the shower was a soft, rhythmic proof of presence. "Of course she is, sweetheart. She's upstairs in the shower. Why do you ask?" The silence that followed was thick, filled only with the faint, tinny announcement of a final boarding call in the background of his call. When he spoke again, his words were careful, deliberate, as if he were handling something fragile and dangerous. "Mom, that can't be right. I am holding her passport in my hand, Cassandra Elaine Vance. I watched her board my flight 10 minutes ago. She's settled in seat 2A, first class, bound for Paris." A cold finger traced a path down my spine. I gave a small, dismissive laugh. "Julian, you must have seen someone who resembles her. Travelers, hairstyles, you know how it is. I just spoke to her." "No." The word was final, solid. I verified it. After I found this at the gate, I did a walkthrough. It's her. She's sitting next to a man in a Charvet tie and a Brioni suit. They're speaking intimately. They're familiar. At that precise moment, the shower upstairs shut off. The silence it left was abrupt.
Then the creak of the bathroom door, the soft pad of bare feet on the hallway runner. Cassandra's voice, clear and real, called down. "Eleanor, who was that on the phone?" My heart, a dormant drum, began a frantic pounding rhythm against my ribs. "Oh, just Lydia from the garden club," I stammered, my mouth parchment dry, confirming the meeting for Thursday. I quickly moved from the kitchen into the living room, out of sight from the staircase. "Julian," I'm whispering fiercely into the receiver. "She's here. I can hear her moving. I'm looking at the damp spot on the hallway floor. And I'm looking at her sipping a glass of Perrier Jouet while we taxied to the runway," he replied, his voice a mix of frustration and profound confusion. "One of us is witnessing an impossibility, Mom, and the documentary evidence is currently in my flight bag." We hung up, the click of the receiver echoing in the sudden, profound quiet of the house. I stood in the middle of my living room, surrounded by familiar photographs and well-loved furniture, yet I felt utterly untethered. The bedrock of my ordinary day had fissured, and through the crack seeped a slow, chilling dread. The logic was paralyzing. If Cassandra was authentically here, who was on Julian's flight? And if the woman en route to Paris was indisputably Cassandra, then what entity was presently moving through the rooms above me? The Cassandra who descended the stairs minutes later was a masterpiece of normalcy. She wore a simple cream-colored cashmere sweater and tailored trousers, her dark hair wound into a neat chignon, damp at the temples. She offered me her usual serene smile. "I'm heading to the Portland Farmers Market early. They have those black trumpet mushrooms you enjoy. Shall I get some?"
I observed her as an art historian might scrutinize a forged painting, searching for flaws in the brushstrokes. The arch of her brow, the timbre of her voice, the way she tucked a stray hair behind her ear. It was all her, wasn't it? "Mushrooms would be lovely, thank you," I said, my own voice sounding hollow and distant to my ears. She left, a picture of domestic grace. The moment the front door clicked shut, I sank into my favorite armchair, a worn leather wingback that had been my husband Arthur's. This was where I graded papers for 30 years, where I read to Benjamin and Julian, and now to Oliver. Its embrace, usually a solace, now felt like a trap. Julian was not given to fantasy. He was a man of checklists and protocols, of confirmed facts and clear skies. His certainty was a stark, unignorable landmark in my suddenly fog-shrouded reality. In the days that followed, I became an unwilling detective in my own home. I began to notice, and more importantly, to record, subtleties I had previously glossed over as human inconsistency. It began with handwriting. I found a grocery list on the kitchen counter, penned in Cassandra's elegant, looping cursive with her right hand. The next day, a note for the postal carrier was written in a sharper, more angular script with her left. When I gently inquired, she laughed, a light tinkling sound. "My New Year's resolution, to become ambidextrous. It's supposed to create new neural pathways." I began to mentally catalog her dispositions. There was warm Cassandra, who would spend a rainy afternoon baking sublays with Oliver, her laughter mingling with his, who would ask about my day with genuine interest. And then there was cool Cassandra, who moved through the house with detached efficiency, whose smiles never reached her eyes, who would give curt one-word answers and seemed perpetually preoccupied, her gaze often drifting to the clock or her phone. External corroboration came from my sharp-eyed neighbor Margaret during our weekly tea. "Your Cassandra is such a lovely presence, Eleanor," she remarked, stirring her Earl Grey. "Always so gracious when she returns my serving platter, though last Friday she seemed rather distracted, almost didn't recognize me for a moment. Jet lag, perhaps?" The most poignant evidence, however, came from my grandson. One evening, as I was tucking him into bed, he looked at me with those clear, trusting eyes. "Grandma,
Does Mommy have a secret friend? A secret friend, darling? Yeah, sometimes when she thinks I'm asleep, she sings a different song, not my usual lullabies. It's in a pretty language, but my other mommy doesn't know that song. My other mommy. The phrase, uttered in innocent confusion, was a key turning in a lock deep within me. It gave terrifying voice to the hypothesis taking shape in the shadows of my mind. This was no longer a matter of odd moods or forgetfulness. A pattern was emerging, one that pointed to a staggering, unbelievable conclusion. I needed evidence beyond my own growing suspicions. Using the pretext of wanting to create a detailed family history for Oliver, I began discreetly researching Cassandra's past, a past she had always kept vague, citing a childhood spent overseas. My search, conducted in the hushed stillness of the Portland Library's archives and through delicate online searches, was frustratingly slow. But a thread emerged. Cassandra's birth records were sealed, part of a private closed adoption in Nevada over 30 decades ago. The trail was cold, but the nature of it, the secrecy, was itself a clue. A desperate, terrifying theory crystallized. What if the flawlessly curated woman I knew was living a double life, and what if maintaining that duplicity required a stand-in? The catalyst for action was cool Cassandra announcing an unusually long solo errand one Saturday, a day-long trip to a spa in the Columbia River Gorge, she said. The alibi was perfect. Instead of skepticism, I expressed hope she'd enjoy the relaxation. But as her car disappeared down the street, a fierce grandmotherly protectiveness overrode my aversion to deception. I followed her. My hands were clammy on the steering wheel as I trailed her silver sedan out of our leafy suburb, across the Willamette River, and into a part of the city the glossy travel brochures never featured. The buildings grew older, the paint more faded. She finally parked in front of a modest, somewhat neglected apartment complex in the Lentz neighborhood. From the cautious sanctuary of my car, I watched. She was admitted not by a stranger, but a young woman, and when that woman turned momentarily to glance through the window, the breath froze in my lungs. It was Cassandra's face, but it was a face lived in differently. The same elegant bone structure, the same dark hair, but the eyes held a story of weariness, of resilience forged through hardship, a stark contrast to the polished sheen of my daughter-in-law. For a long time I sat there paralyzed by the sight. The theory was no longer abstract, it was flesh and blood, living behind a peeling door. Gathering a courage I didn't know I possessed, a courage fueled by thoughts of Benjamin's shattered trust and Oliver's confusion, I approached the apartment and knocked. The woman who answered stared at me, her face draining of color, a perfect mirror of my own shock. "My name is Eleanor Vance. I believe you may hold the key to understanding something that is happening in my family." Her name, she told me as I sat on her worn but clean sofa, was Sabine, and yes, she was Cassandra's identical twin sister, separated at birth. Their young mother, overwhelmed and destitute, had made an impossible choice through a private agency. One daughter placed with a wealthy, desperate for a child couple who could offer every advantage, the other, Sabine, taken in by a struggling but loving aunt. Their paths had crossed by pure chance 3 years ago at a department store. Cassandra, seeing her own reflection in Sabine's stunned face, saw not family, but opportunity. Sabine, at the time caring for her ailing aunt and drowning in medical debt, was vulnerable. Cassandra offered a solution: money, significant money, in exchange for Sabine occasionally playing her part, to be Cassandra for a few hours, to handle school pickups, grocery runs, or simple home presence while the real Cassandra pursued another life, with a man named Charles Lockwood, a venture capitalist she'd been involved with for over a year.
Sabine was not a mastermind. She was a captive of circumstance, playing a role in a gilded tragedy not of her making. With trembling hands, she showed me text messages, Detailed instructions, lists of Oliver's likes and dislikes, reminders to use her right hand. She showed me envelopes of cash, the different handwriting, the fluctuating moods, the forgotten lullabies. They were not quirks. They were a ledger, a literal record of which sister was present in my home. The puzzle was complete. The picture it formed was one of breathtaking, premeditated betrayal. The perfect daughter-in-law was a performance, a role shared between twins, one ambitious, duplicitous, and cruel, the other coerced, remorseful, and trapped. I drove home through the gathering dusk, the weight of the truth, a physical pressure on my chest. I waited for Benjamin to return from taking Oliver to a movie. When the house was quiet, I asked Cassandra to join me in the living room. I did not shout, I did not accuse, I simply began to speak, my voice a low, tired river of facts. I spoke of Julian's call, I spoke of Sabine, I spoke of Charles Lockwood. I presented no theatrical evidence, just the unassailable, interconnected truth. The woman before me did not collapse into tears or rage. Instead, she underwent a chilling transformation. The gentle mask of Cassandra dissolved, leaving in its place a cold, disdainful stranger. The change was in her posture, in the dismissive flick of her gaze around the room she had called home. "All right," she said, her voice flat, devoid of its usual music. "You've done your homework. Congratulations." She let out a short, humorless breath. "This life, this carefully constructed diorama of domestic bliss with your son," she gestured vaguely, "it's a beautifully appointed cage. Charles represents freedom, a world of sophistication and possibility you can't possibly comprehend." She spent that night in the guest room. The next morning, she packed a single, expensive suitcase. She did not seek out Oliver to say goodbye. She did not offer Benjamin an explanation or an apology. She walked out of our lives as cleanly and ruthlessly as one might exit a stage after a final performance, leaving behind only the echo of her betrayal and the shell of the character she had played. The weeks that followed were a season of silent grief. Benjamin was a ghost of himself, moving through his work and fatherly duties mechanically, his trust in his own judgment shattered. Oliver was quiet, confused, asking gentle questions that broke my heart anew. Did I make Mommy leave? Will she come back for my birthday? In the midst of this pain, an unexpected, gentle presence began to visit Benjamin. Sabine, burdened by a profound and complex guilt, came to see Benjamin. She came not as Cassandra, but fully as herself. She apologized, not with grand speeches, but with quiet sincerity. She brought meals she'd cooked herself, simple, hearty food, and she began, tentatively, to connect with Oliver. She did not try to replace his mother, she simply offered her authentic self. She had Cassandra's face, but her spirit was quieter, kinder, more patient. One night, when Oliver was struggling with a nightmare, she instinctively began to hum. It was the same melodic, foreign lullaby he had once called his mommy's secret song. Sabine knew it because it was a fragment of a tune their biological mother had sung. As she hummed, Oliver's breathing slowed, his small body relaxing. For the first time since the rupture, peace descended on his room. Benjamin witnessed this. He saw the raw honesty in Sabine's remorse, her careful efforts to make amends, not through deception, but through transparency. He saw the genuine affection growing between her and his son, an affection based on truth, not a script. Slowly, cautiously, a new bond began to form. It was born not from shared dreams, but from shared wreckage and a mutual determination to build something real from the ruins. Healing was not linear. It took months of patience, of family therapy for Oliver, of difficult conversations and slow rebuilding of trust. But life, in its resilient way,
began to grow green shoots through the ashes. 2 years after that fateful Tuesday, Benjamin and Sabine were married in a small, heartfelt ceremony in my backyard, under the very rose trellis where this mystery first took root. Oliver, now 9 and beaming with a hard-won joy, was the ring-bearer. He calls Sabine Mom now, not out of confusion or forced obligation, but from a heart that has learned family is defined by who shows up, who stays, who loves you authentically. Julian, my pilot, my first confidant in the chaos, remains our family's steadfast sentinel. His calls from Tokyo, London, or Sydney are constant reminders that we are connected, always, no matter the distance. And I, Eleanor Vance, still sit in my leather armchair. I still drink my morning tea in the sunroom. I still tend my roses. But the stories I tell Oliver now are different. They are tales not of princesses in towers, but of resilience, of courage found in quiet observation, of the truth, however painful, being the only foundation upon which a lasting peace can be built. The music that fills our home now is the sound of genuine laughter, of honest conversation, and of a love that was tested by the deepest deceit and chose, consciously and daily, to rebuild itself with integrity. So, as you drift on the edge of sleep, remember this: even in the most tranquil of homes, courage can whisper in the form of a doubt. Truth can reveal itself in a child's innocent observation, and the most beautiful families are not those without cracks or shadows, but the ones who, when the light finally shines through those cracks, have the courage to see what it reveals and the strength to build something new and authentic in its glow. Thank you for listening. May your night be deep, your dreams serene, and your heart at peace.